A few months ago, I was listening to a Pendergast story. That's a story written by Douglas Preston and Lee Child while I was driving about town. And there was this moment that it went from, you know how that classical phrase is, the plot thickens? Well, the plot went from a pretty good broth to a really thick stew in a moment. And let me read this to you because when I heard this story, I decided that I had to share it with you. And I went and got the book from the local library. So let me just read you a little tiny bit, just a couple of sentences really, fair use, educational purposes, all that. Okay, so the book is Preston and Child, Fever Dream. It's number 10 in the Pendergast series, and I will of course link to it in the blog post. So the background for the story is that Pendergast, of course, is in one of his amazing adventures, and he has been for the past several days in the storyline at the family home of very dilapidated but at one time gorgeous southern plantation home, and it is staffed by just one person, Maurice, who is elderly at this stage. He has taken care of the Pendergast family for generations. And Maurice is devoted. Maurice would never do anything to harm Pendergast or in any way betray the trust of the family. But there's this moment. So, here we go. I understand. Maurice paused a moment. Where are you going, sir? Malfourche, a tiny town on Black Brake Swamp. Very good, sir. Have a safe trip. Thank you, Maurice. We'll see you tomorrow. Of course, I'm garbling the southern accents, but the line went dead, and Maurice replaced the receiver. He paused a moment, staring at it, thinking. Then he picked it up again and dialed. The phone rang several times before a man's voice answered. Hello, Maurice said. Mr. Judson, sir? The voice on the other end answered in the affirmative. This is page 313 in the hardcover. So, why it's so spine-chilling at this moment? Because the man that Maurice just called, Judson Esterhazy, is determined to kill Pendergast, determined to wreak utter ruin and devastation on his life. Oh, wow. Judson convinced Maurice that Judson was acting on Pendergast's best interests and that Maurice needed to keep Judson aware so that Judson could help Pendergast out. And Maurice, who is a very noble, but in this particular case, too trusting a soul, believed Judson. What this brings up for all of us is the notion of loyalty, because there's no question that Maurice is devoted to Pendergast. His loyalty is unquestionable. His judgment in this case is like, he's made a very, very bad mistake. What this means for us, as we are those who will be creating AGIs, artificial general intelligences, is that we need to think about things like loyalty. Now, right now, with our current AI systems, you're hearing the roosters in the background. We're moving towards evening here in Hawaii. Roosters. Early morning, early evening. Now, back to our storyline. AGIs, loyalty. Current AIs, look, they don't have the capability to even consider loyalty as part of their system. They're built of typically a reinforcement learning system coupled with large language model, or LLM. No way to encode loyalty there. Reinforcement learning is goal-directed. It gets you to where you need to be. Win the chess game, win the Go game, win the whatever, achieve the specific goal. Very goal-driven. If we're going to imbue core values, such as loyalty, into an AGI, we need a totally different approach. But before we get there, let's just take a moment and think through what loyalty means. I just said it's a core value. And how do we know what core values we want to put into our AGIs? Loyalty makes good sense. Take just a moment. Sometimes it's really hard to figure out what our core values are. If I asked you right now to write down a list of your top 5 core values, could you do it on the spur of the moment? I mean, I had a hard time. I was asked when I was taking an online course several months ago to one of the first exercises, write down your core values, at least 5 of them. And I was just stumped. It's like, how that? I had no idea. It was really hard for me to, so I just put that on pause and went on and addressed some other questions and kept it in my mind saying, okay, at some point I'll be able to start figuring this out, but it's not just write them all down. We figure out our core values in this very indirect sort of way. The notion of loyalty as a core value pops up with this story. If you take a look at the written core values for organizations such as the CIA, they list integrity and service as the top 2. Obviously, if you're going to train somebody to be a spy, you want them to have integrity, right? Okay. So I was talking recently with a younger family member. She's actually a second cousin. So her grandfather was my father's brother. And she'd gone to a university where they emphasize studying the classics and developing the ability to really think through substantial issues. And as our conversation progressed, she brought up the topic of AI, and she said she was concerned about AI diminishing our critical thinking abilities. And right now, of course, she's in a graduate study and having to write 2 essays a week, and I suspect that some of her colleagues are maybe just like ChatGPTing it, and she, of course, because it's her core value to have critical thinking, she's not just having ChatGPT write the essay for her. But that brought up to me, we have family core values. And sometimes you need these little sideways clues to figure out, oh, this is not just her. This is family, because education and critical thinking was something that kind of got passed down to me. And clearly from her grandfather to her mother to her. And both her grandfather and my father came from a family environment that was not wealthy, not particularly educated, but their father had worked for a university. It was buildings and grounds, not an academic position, but it was the kind of environment that fostered respect for education. You can see a core value go through 4 generations of a family. Wow, isn't that interesting? And we can, now just thinking about it, probably find numerous families where core values might exist, like a family that has a tradition of military service, or a tradition of serving in, say, for example, the State Department, or a tradition of medical care. We can find all sorts of core values embedded into family lines, now that we know how to start looking for them. So here's another example of a core value. I was talking with a friend on the phone recently, and we were both talking about how many evenings per week we each spent just plain chopping up veggies. She described how she was something that she realized was being called an ingredients shopper rather than as a prepared foods shopper. So when she goes to Costco, she's loading up on the freshies, and of course she goes to the farmer's market. I do also. So if she buys something from Costco that is fast and easy to put on the table right away when she gets home, it's carefully curated because of the ingredients list. So it might be fast to put together, but it's, as far as she can manage, healthy. Being committed to ingredients shopping and preparing foods at home is a significant commitment. And I realized after we'd had this conversation that this was a core value, and that she was imbuing this core value into her entire family dynamic. Figuring out our core values, really important. Putting them into our AGIs, essential. So suppose that one value that we want to put into our AGIs is loyalty. Makes sense, right? The very, very last thing that you want your AGI to do is start slipping your personal secrets to anybody who comes and knocks on the door in a digital sense and says, well, can you give me this person's passwords, their credit information, their this, that, the other, any kind of personal information that can be divulged. But as we know right now, our current AI systems, that is, our LLMs coupled with the reinforcement learning systems, They're betraying our personal information left, right, and sideways. If you go to Meta, apparently the new word is they're going to monitor your chats to find out how to target advertising for you. I've heard that Grok is similarly going to be engaging in targeted advertising. Google, of course, knows all about us from our collective Google queries, so targeted advertising. And ChatGPT, their stuff recently got leaked. It's like, ooh, ick. That is a very uncomfortable thought for those that have been spilling their hearts out to ChatGPT. So, right now, there's no such thing as loyalty. Or if there is, it's to the corporate overlords, not to you, not to me. When we get to the point where you and I purchase, and it won't be for cheap, it's not going to be like a $10 a month fee, but when we start to purchase and have our own special dedicated AGIs, oh gosh, yes, loyalty needs to be up there. Perhaps maybe a little bit of transparency about operations also. This is the kind of thing that we need to start thinking about now and figuring out how and where we're going to put it into our AGI system design. It's not an afterthought. This is not that we come up with, like, in second and third release and say, oh, yeah, we should, work this and shoehorn this in somehow. No, it's got to be fundamental to the design process, whatever core values we decide we want. Because they're not going to go into the lowest level of the AGI. For example, our world model is going to serve whatever component of the AGI makes high-value decisions about basically how to jump, how to operate within the world, but it will not necessarily hold the core values. Any short-term do this, don't do that will be a decision based on higher level guidance. So we're going to have to go all the way up to the topmost levels of our AGI, the portion where we hold not just reasoning, but goals, and even things like mission and purpose, and what we're calling these days alignment. So I've got a little bit of follow-on for this in the associated blog post. It's got some good references if you're interested. And think of this as you would as the reading material to support the lecture portion of this little conversation. If we haven't met before, I'm Dr. Aliana Moran, founder and chief scientist with Themesis, founder of the Themesis Academy, and I've been immersing myself in preparations for AGI essentially all my life, but in particular over the past decade. So we're going to take this conversation just a little deeper technically, and to do this, we're going to reference a very simple little diagram for an AGI system. This is just a back of the envelope diagram. We're probably going to modify it many, many times, even at the simplest level over the next several months. I actually put this together about a year and a half ago for a talk I was giving at the Trenton Computer Fest and needed to have a little framework. So what we're going to do is ask ourselves, where will encoding some sort of value, a core value like loyalty, fit into our AGI? Like, what major component of the architecture will be the one that receives loyalty encoding? Now I'm going to go through this very, very fast, so please take advantage of the blog post. Links to that blog post are in the description box below, and use that as a pointer system to get access to the many resources that I'm going to mention over the next few minutes. And important note, coming soon, I expect we're going to have a new Substack channel, and there will be a private membership tier where more detailed discussions of this, as well as community discussions, including group meetings, can be had. The best way you can be sure of having the most recent and important information is to opt in with Themesis. Please go to our website, themesis.com, go to the About page, use the opt-in form, and please do the confirmation email and move the Themesis emails to your preferred inbox folder so that you're guaranteed to get all the latest word. So let's return to our little first pass architecture for an AGI system and see where we might situate a core value such as loyalty. First of all, that psi to the right denotes the external world. That's a Karl Friston notation that is used in active inference. The entire system is enclosed in what we would call a Markov blanket. That is, there is a separation in a cognitive or design sense that separates the system from the world that it observes and interacts with. On the left-hand side of the system, where we see the ontology at the top, the signal layer at the bottom, and an internal control loop with the corticon pass-through layer in the middle, what we're seeing is a rough sketch for a neurosymbolic world model. We're not going to put the value system within the world model itself. There may be elements of the world model that will be directed to highlight aspects relating to how core values are being observed or interpreted within the world, but that's not where we situate the directives for any of our core values. The internal control loops that we see within this world model are simply to modify the neurosymbolic interactions. External control loops will largely be used to direct focus of attention within the world model. The reasoning, close, we're going to discuss that in a moment, but not quite. It is much more likely that the core values will be situated in the highest level within the system, goals and mega controls. And the reason for that is that we have certain reasoning tools more or less to hand, but as we investigate them, they do not within themselves have the wherewithal to encapsulate our deepest core values in the system. There's one important thing for you to know. I've mentioned reinforcement learning won't cut it. There's an alternative method to be thinking about as we move towards AGIs. It's not complete in and of itself. It's not going to solve all of our AGI problems, but it will likely play a role, and that's active inference. Now, active inference is a generative method developed by Karl Friston based on variational inference. Thus, two of the most promising tools that we have available right now for implementing reasoning capabilities include reinforcement learning, some lovely references to recent articles in the blog post. Please go there to check them out. And then also Karl Friston's active inference. And we're not going to have a long discussion here because I've described this method so much in previous YouTubes and blog posts. Please check them out. The blog post links to YouTube's other blog posts with the key reference papers, tutorials that will be essential in helping you understand this. So please make use of these resources. One final note as we close. You may be asking yourself, what's the role of generative AI as we move into AGI? Variational inference is generative. The Boltzmann machine is generative. Transformers are generative. To understand why all these different methods are generative, frankly, I had to do a bit of deep dive studying. It took me several months. This was almost 2 years ago. Generative AI, which I've discussed in great length, blog posts, YouTubes, numerous tutorials. Generative AI encompasses a few key elements. One of the most important pillars of generative AI is that we are adapting a model to best fit a representation. And then, of course, as we do generation, a second key element is that we're not just working with the data from the representation itself, but rather with latent variables that we can say are conditionally dependent on the observations. That's a Bayesian element. And then third, to make these things functionally work across the board, there's an element of statistical mechanics, which not many people know in the depth that would really help them master this. I wound up putting the key things into a short course, top 10 terms in statistical mechanics, and the reason for that is the great big bear in the whole challenge of understanding generative methods, which are going to be a component of AGI, not the whole thing, but a necessary and vital component. StatMech plays a role, and it's the hardest one to teach ourselves, because if you're just trying to teach yourselves from like grabbable sources on the web, too heavily into the physicality of the statistical mechanics, pressure, volume, temperature, not enough in the clean, stripped down, pure view that will help you get through how those concepts pertain to generative AI. So please go to the blog post, follow the blog post links on this thread of conversation. So once again, to get the best supporting information possible, to learn how you can take a course with us that'll get you up to speed and on top of this, please do check us out in the blog post, which has links to all the useful references. And once again, sign up, opt in with us. We'll make sure that you're kept up to date. Thank you. Once again, Aliana Moren from Themesis. Have a lovely day, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon.